Right, well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Spaces virtual conference on the theme of Net Zero Carbon Climate Emergency 2021. My name is Richard Davidson and I'll be your chair for this afternoon's webinar. So just before commencing the introduction of our speaker, I'd like to thank our 5 sponsors, which is Atkins, Faithful and Gould, IES, NPS Group and Wilmot Dixon, all for their support. Thank you. All of the webinars over the next 2 weeks are being recorded and will be loaded onto the Spaces YouTube channel. Delegates and Spaces members will be sent a link at the end of this conference. The recordings are only available to delegates and Spaces members. If you have any questions, please include them in the chat box, which you should see on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will answer those towards the end of this presentation. So this afternoon's webinar is Addressing the Climate Crisis in Essex, which is being presented by Sam Kennedy. Sam is Director of Environment and Climate Action at Essex County Council, and she is driving the authority's response to the climate challenge. She leads a broad portfolio of services, including waste, energy, flood resilience, green space, outdoor education, culture and heritage, bringing with her a wealth of experience from roles at central government, TfL and the EST. That's a lot there, Sam, so let's go for this. So without further ado, we'll let Sam tell us more about taking action on the climate crisis.
Thanks very much, Richard. I have got some slides which I will just walk through, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. So if we could, I can move my own slides. I'm so used to asking someone else to do that. Brilliant. So yeah, thanks very much for joining me today online. And we are kind of doing everything online now, as we're still sort of adapting to this, I want to say post-COVID world. I don't think we're quite there yet. But, you know, as we all reflect on the changes and the immense challenges that the last year and a bit has brought, I think it's worth calling out that every government and international body ranks the risks from climate change and the impacts that this will have on our daily lives far in excess of the global pandemic. So I'll just share an example from the World Economic Forum here, who note that this is indeed our biggest risk and that we are not doing enough. So what are we doing in Essex to try to bridge that gap? In 2020, we set up a climate commission. So the council recognised that we have a climate crisis, but really wanted an action plan to get us from where we are today to a kind of a net zero climate resilient Essex in the future, and wanted some really advice and guidance on what is the best way to get there. What do we need to do to have meaningful progress, to make meaningful progress in this space? So the Commission has brought together over 30 commissioners who are a range of experts from academia, business, the community sector, public sector, stakeholder groups, trade bodies, who have very kindly given us their time. The chair is Lord Randall of Uxbridge, alongside 2 young members of the Young Essex Assembly, who are incredible advocates of kind of the viewpoint of young people, to really help us think about this challenge and what this means for Essex. The Commission's been meeting over the last year and really thinking about what does an action plan for Essex look like, and has made over 130 recommendations on things that need to happen in Essex, primarily actually over the next 10 years, which is really critical in deciding our climate future. You will be relieved, I'm sure, to know that I am not going to go through all 130 recommendations. And I don't even expect you to be able to read this, but it just gives you a feel for the kind of level of detailed analysis that's gone on, the level of discussion that's set out a roadmap for Essex between now and 2050 to make sure that we really are taking the necessary action to put us on track for a climate-friendly future. So the Commission has, of course, been thinking about the need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. You'll all know, of course, that we are committed to be a net zero country by 2050. And our main sources of emissions set out here nationally are mirrored in Essex too. This is not a surprise to anyone. Transport is the biggest sector nationally. That's true for us in Essex. But the reason I start with this, when we're kind of talking about this, is that, of course, carbon emission reduction is critical, is key, is the basis for all of our discussion here, but it's not the only thing we need to consider. When we talk about climate, we tend to think of climate change as something in the future tense, something that is happening at some point further down the line. So it's really important to note that climate has already changed, that the challenges of a changing climate are already with us, are already being felt by our residents, by our businesses. And you can see this every time you turn on the news. So we've had terrible forest fires in Australia, in California. Last year in the UK, we had an unprecedented 110 wildfires, really unusual levels of wildfire activity. And these risks are continuing to increase year on year. So for us here in Essex, that means that we are destined for ever hotter summers. We, for the first time, have to think about the risks of overheating, as well as the challenges of keeping warm in winter. And there are things that we attach to that perhaps we aren't considering enough. So as the summers warm up, that also introduces significantly increased subsidence risk for our buildings. The clay in Essex is prone to drying, cracking and shrinkage, and Essex, London and bits of Oxfordshire have been identified in a recent study as kind of key areas that are going to see real increases in subsidence in the coming years because of climate change. And it's not just heat. We have a really significant flooding issue in Essex. It's a low-lying county. We suffer from coastal erosion. We are worried about coastal flooding, but actually our key risk is from surface water flooding. We had a miserable winter last winter, lots of flooding on our roads, lots of flooding in people's homes. But again, this will continue to increase year on year, and the number of homes at risk of flooding could double between now and 2050, again, because of our already changing climate. So we work very hard through the winter to get our water off the ground and into pipes and safely out into the sea where it can't flood our homes. And then the hot weather rolls around and suddenly we have a terrible problem with water scarcity. Essex has a real issue with this. We're one of the areas of highest water pressure in the country. So we have floods in winter, droughts in summer. And again, if we don't take action, this is going to continue to worsen year on year. So overheating alongside water shortages, real problems. And it's worth setting out that background because this is exactly the things that people are already experiencing. This isn't something that's happening far away. This isn't something that's happening in decades hence. This is affecting people in the here and now. And what the Commission has really been clear about is that if we don't make changes, this is a real threat to our landscape and our agricultural sector. We're going to see significant land degradation, soil quality degradation, soil loss, and we're just not going to be able to grow the crops that we currently grow. Our landscape's going to look really significantly different and considerably poorer. So what is the Commission recommending that we actually do? So the Commission's considered action across a number of core themes, and I'm going to just walk you through these at a very top level. So first of all, very significant changes are required for our land use. There's a whole raft of recommendations around significantly increasing green infrastructure, recognising the important role that trees have, sustainable drainage, salt marshes as part of long-term sustainable coastal protection, really changing the makeup of our land so that it can absorb increased rainfall in the winter and store it effectively for when we need it in the summer, and reducing our water scarcity. The importance of green infrastructure in providing shade against overheating in our urban spaces. Again, all of these things are already pressing and will become critical in future years. A real call to move to sustainable agricultural practices, again, key to stopping land erosion from soil runoff. We need our residents and businesses to recognise these increasing threats, and collectively we need to step up our investment in adaptation to manage changes that are already with us and will continue to worsen. So, steps that we're already taking in this space. We have published a green infrastructure strategy. There was a work of over 60 partners across Essex and was recently accredited by Natural England. And we're working with partners to really start delivery against this. And that started us along the path to achieving some of the Commission's vision that is set out so clearly here. We are working with partners to plant trees. Last winter, we planted 38,000 trees on ECC and partner land. And again, this is a programme that we're stepping up year on year. We start to think about not just our rural landscape, but our built environment. We have over 600,000 existing homes in Essex. Most of these, the majority of these, have an EPC of D or below. So we have a really substantial retrofit challenge to get these homes up to standard for a net zero world. And alongside our existing towns and villages, government has a really significant ambition for housing growth in Essex. And so the carbon footprint associated with both our existing built environment and our planned new environment, the transport impacts, the risk from flooding, the water pressures, the energy requirements are all really, really key things to think about. There was a real call that every home built now needs to be built to net zero standards. Otherwise, all we're doing is adding to our retrofit problem further down the line. One study recently suggested that consumers could spend up to £20,000 per house, bringing a home that's built today up to net zero standards. And that's leaving house buyers with a considerable legacy cost. I'm not sure I would consider that best value from a consumer perspective. So again, here, when we consider the built environment, the Commission have been pretty clear and quite ambitious in terms of new homes moving to net zero by 2025 and carbon positive by 2030, recognising that some parts of our estate, so loads of the heritage buildings that we have here in Essex, will never meet that net zero challenge themselves. So the sector as a whole needs to balance that out. A lot of work is already going on in this space. We are working with planning authorities across Essex to update the Essex Design Guide. We're working with developers to explore how we can bring forward pilot programmes. And we are on our own estate already building. We've built 3 extensions to schools which are EPC A rated, using modern methods of construction, very tight fabric standards, low carbon heating. And so we are bringing forward these new approaches to these challenges. That's not to say that we're in a place where we've got it all sewn up. I don't think any local authority or housing association has. But we're certainly starting to make some real significant strides in this direction. A lot more to do, I think we would all agree, though. I mentioned energy very briefly. The Commission has called on Essex to generate all its energy needs from renewable sources inside the county by 2040, with a focus on solar. We're really well placed with our weather for this technology to perform really well. And again, for waste, a call to move to a circular economy, reducing waste in the first place through green procurement and innovation, and then significantly stepping up reuse and recycling. Our recycling levels have been really stubborn at around 55% in Essex for a number of years. We just aren't moving the dial, and that really needs to change. We are making strides. So things recently, really proud of plastic plastic-free Fearing. Fearing was awarded plastic-free community status by Surfers Against Sewage, and it was the first community in Essex to achieve that. Again, that's a really great achievement by collective local action in that space. And at ECC, we have started a new project, Blueprint for a Circular Economy, where we're leading a cross-border project to help local authorities in England and France move towards a circular economy. And that means a lot of projects to increase recycling, reduce waste, and encourage lasting behaviour change, particularly with our businesses across multiple sectors, as well as training people to help them secure employment in the green economy. In terms of energy, we're supporting our first community energy groups in Essex. This is again an area where we haven't had community energy groups. We've supported establishing those and providing them with advice and guidance on getting started. And we are currently investigating how we can use our own energy purchasing to drive renewable investments, building on some of the experience recently of the City of London. Transport. So transport is a really significant challenge for us in Essex. We don't have the dense public transport that you see in cities. A lot of our residents are car dependent. 72% of the land area in Essex is rural. And transport recommendations have a very clear focus on reducing this car dependence. The Commission have called on Essex to deliver a step change in public transport provision. So we're really excited to see the new national bus strategy. That's really great. And to see a real step up in active travel. So a lot more walking, a lot more cycling. And only for those journeys where, because it's a rural county, they have to be made by car, then those journeys should be electrified. But first and foremost, the call has been to reduce the necessity for car journeys and leaving only the minority of journeys left that must be electrified in that space. In terms of taking action on this, I mentioned that we're really pleased to see the national bus strategy, and we'll be responding to that. But more directly, we've just launched a consultation on cycling and walking routes in 5 towns across the county. It's called the Active Travel Essex Consultation. It's live right now, and we think this is a really bold first step in this direction. So the Commission have set us some really bold challenges in terms of really significant changes, and the vast majority of those changes are certainly required very significant steps along these roads in the next decade. So the focus is on taking action right now, not delaying. But we're also clear that alongside those challenges come really big opportunities. I think people at this conference will be very well aware of the opportunities around green construction arising from kind of net zero building standards and the retrofit opportunities. But alongside those, really, really big opportunities from the energy transition. The LGA has done a piece of work looking at potential jobs across all of the council regions in England that are arising from this. If you haven't seen it, I'd really commend their tool on the website, really worth a look. And you can see there are really significant numbers of jobs that have been modelled to arise from the transition to renewable energy. And this is a big deal for us in Essex, of course, as it will be for everywhere. Everyone wants to ensure that they are unlocking the opportunities attached to this transition for their residents and for their businesses. Likewise, the move to the circular economy. So widespread adoption of circular economy is again, modelled to have a really significant value add and a large number of jobs due to fall out of this. So alongside very significant calls for new investment and for very significant policy changes, we are also aware of very significant opportunities and new spaces that we can step into as a county that are arising from this. So what are the next steps? The Commission is pulling together all of its recommendations and publishing those in July. So there'll be a launch event on the 20th of July. Watch this space for more details. But it'd be really great to get all of the detailed recommendations that I just don't simply have the time to go through with you this afternoon, kind of all in one place so that we can be very clear about the action plan for Essex. And then the Commission over the next year will be focusing on moving from a vision into really detailed action planning and delivery, a real focus on working with partners to actually make those recommendations into realities across Essex, with a focus on unlocking these opportunities. How do we drive green growth? How do we pull in the green finance to really support delivery of these ambitions and unlock the benefits of a net zero transition in Essex? I must note that, of course, we've just had local government elections, and as a result of that, we have a new leader in Essex County Council, Councillor Kevin Bentley, and a new cabinet. But the new administration have been absolutely crystal clear that climate change is a central tenet of the administration. This is a quote from the new leader in his first speech, a real commitment to delivering on the ambition set out by the Commission and moving Essex into a place where it is absolutely on track to be net zero by 2050, if not before. So I will leave that there, but I'm really, really happy to take questions and open up a discussion. Thanks very much.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Sam. I've seen that presentation a couple of times now, and I still pick out new things. And I think that's what's been really important about what you've said there. And yeah, I think when you kind of pointed out that you've got 130 recommendations, I think that probably does go to show the level of detail that you've been working on. And also, I think it was really valuable to hear you talking about all the different themes. So they're clearly in line with some of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I think what's nice to hear, I think it's nice to hear from my point of view, is that we know we're all kind of going in the same direction on this. Because I think that's something I've talked about, you've talked about, others have talked about, is there's no need, we don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
Actually, I think a lot of those recommendations we kind of knew them. And I think what I like to hear was you talking about action. And I think that's probably the difference. So I wrote a few questions down as we went through. I've seen some bits pop up. So I'll just throw one in here to start with, which was really, you kind of started off and just said the climate has already changed.
Yeah.
And I just wondered, from where you sit as in your position kind of in the local government, is how many people kind of get that? Do you have a feel on that?
So it's really interesting. This was one of the I think councillors, if you talk to them about what hits their mailbox, in the winter, the thing they get the most mail about is flooding. It's a real problem. It ruins people's journeys. It ruins people's homes. It disrupts businesses, and then it leaves just massive disruption in its wake. Even when the flood water's gone, there's just huge damage, and the repercussions, the impacts on individual lives and places are really huge. So people know that these things are happening. What they hadn't done was make that link with a changing climate. And actually, we have talked a lot in Essex about the fact that flooding isn't going to get any better. That the weather patterns show it's going to get worse. And unless we do something about our landscape to a strategic change to how we use our land to allow it to absorb that water, it doesn't matter how much money we spend on pipe work, we're never going to solve this problem. So I think people can see the impacts that are happening. Everyone knows summers are hotter. So anyone with a garden knows that the weather patterns have changed. what people haven't done is really connect that at a visceral level to climate change and understand that this isn't going to, these changes are going to continue and continue and continue. So this is something that we have talked a lot with our businesses and with our councillors. And we are starting, one of the themes that there's a time limit to what I can talk about here, but one of the key themes that the Commission's also been very focused on is community engagement. So how do we start a conversation with our business community, with our community groups, with our residents that really helps people understand this and not feel overwhelmed, but actually rather feel empowered to take action and to get involved. And so we've started that work. We've done consultation on the Commission's recommendations, got really, really strong support for them. And we've started doing some research into kind of what do people understand in Essex, and where are they in terms of making those links, and how can we help them increase their understanding.
Okay, well, that's good. I was aware that you were going to do some of that, and I think I recognise that where I live is that, yeah, people understand there's flooding, people understand there's water scarcity, but it feels it's immediate, and it's not understood that you've got to take some longer term views, which is what you mentioned. I know a couple of people, someone's asked about a link you gave to a website, which I think was the LGA. There's a calculator, so we'll just make sure we go. We'll send the slides out anyway. So
yeah, absolutely.
For anyone who hasn't seen that, we've got a question from Fiona McMillan. Fiona McMillan, thank you. So I should have put different glasses on. So her question is, how do you align the ambition to commission zero carbon schools with the free school presumption? So that's basically a lot of brand new schools aren't commissioned by Essex County Council. So can you just elaborate a little bit more on how you're going to guide these zero carbon schools?
So it's a really, really good question. So I think the first thing I would say is the Commission's pretty clear that all the recommendations are not just for ECC. These recommendations are not just for Essex County Council. These are recommendations for everyone. And obviously in ECC, we're looking at what we can do with the schools that we commission so that we are showing what's possible, and that we are showing that we're kind of walking the walk ourselves. We're doing the right thing ourselves. So we are looking at that right now. It's a really, really live project within ECC to see how far we can go, how quickly we can go in that direction. I think it's then about, we're very clear we need to be setting out what are the things we're responsible for, and therefore we need to own. What are the things where we can convene others to share best practice, to show what's possible, to encourage others to take more action? And how can we liaise with the industry, developers, those people who are commissioning new schools, government, to drive higher standards and to drive higher ambition? So can I say that I will guarantee that every school that is built in Essex will be net zero? No. Can I say that we will be absolutely pulling all the levers that we can? Yes. So, we are not, I can't, it's not possible for me to deliver all of the recommendations or even a fraction of them by ECC acting alone. This absolutely has to be a joint endeavour, and we want to take people with us on this journey.
That's good. Thank you. That's good. That probably feeds in nicely to the next question from Andrew Rowe. So congratulating you really on it. Feels like you're ahead of many of local authorities. So his question is, how are you joining up with other local authorities to share your good practice, which is, I guess, leads nicely from what you've just talked about? Yeah.
So we are a member of lots of networks. So that's the first thing is Adept. There's a PCAN network, which is a network of local authorities who also have commissions, and we're sharing best practice and sharing information. So I think, and again, organisations like the LGA. So those networks are really, really important to come together, share experience, share data. I think we're also working very closely with our universities in Essex to make sure, again, that we are sharing information across multiple networks. And I think we liaise closely with central government, again, who help us make links with local authorities we wouldn't otherwise talk to, who are thinking about similar things. I would also say, just picking up the phone, so Manchester have been incredibly helpful in sharing, the information on some of the work that they've done, the journey that they've been on. Mark Atherton in Manchester, for those of you that don't know, is the climate lead there, and has been incredibly generous. He's come down, shared his experience, and shared some of their information. Likewise, other authorities who have done things with community energy groups have very kindly come along, given talks, shared some of their time. So I think there is a really good culture of information sharing across local government. And I think you just need to not be shy, actually, and just lift the phone. People are incredibly willing to come and tell you about stuff that they've done. We had Leeds came and gave a talk to the Commission about their experience of running their commission. So there is a huge willingness to share information. I think it's just plugging into networks and making best use of those.
Cool, that's good. And maybe I could say to everyone on this webinar is that now that they've seen what Essex is doing, is to take it away to where they might work or where they might live or who they have conversations with. And I know I've been trying to do that with some and actually embarrass them and say, well, Essex are doing it, why aren't you doing it? So let's see how that goes. I was just gonna, there's a question I picked up on which I hadn't spotted before. So you talked about what you called stubborn recycling rates. I think you 55%. Yeah. Is it clear to you what causes that?
So it's a mix of things. We're a split responsibility authority, and we have really good waste separation. I mean, genuinely very good, but not complete. So in a scale of kind of councils across the UK, we're really proud that actually our level of waste separation is good, because waste separation really drives much better recycling. If people can separate their waste and it's collected and dealt with separately, then that's the key. I really think the Environment Bill coming through in the autumn, which will set out mandatory recycling, waste separation, and a lot more new legislation around treatment of waste, is actually going to be key to driving greater levels of recycling. I think also there's been, some properties, domestic properties, are more difficult than others. So historically, flatted properties aren't provided with recycling facilities. Quite difficult. I think we just need to grasp those difficult nettles and solve them, actually. I think giving people the opportunity to find alternatives. We've been really successful in driving recycling, but then we also then have a whole raft of new products that kind of drive new waste streams. So one of the things that happened during COVID was everyone was at home and getting deliveries, and the volumes of waste that we were dealing with went up really significantly, not just in Essex, across the country. Of course they did, because everyone was in that behaviour pattern. So, really trying to help businesses think about packaging, really trying to help, the Amazons of this world think about packaging. I think that's really got to be, when we start to talk about a circular economy, that's where that conversation starts to go, is actually, what products are we making that's driving these volumes of waste that then create products that are really difficult to recycle, and therefore that we're left with a rump of waste that we can't do anything with. So I think that going further up the food chain when we're having that waste conversation is really key, as well as supporting people to make the best recycling choices that they can on the ground.
No, that's really good. I think there's a lot to be said about maybe the shop local, which I think could change some of the way packaging and passing. And I know there's something in there. And then I guess you mentioned that there's a change of legislation. I think as a consumer sometimes is those mixed material products, you're actually not quite sure. It might say recyclable on the back, but you're not actually quite sure if your council is ready to take it. So I'm fully aware of that. But it's nice to hear somebody else's point of view. It's always useful. So Steve Rufus has asked you the difficult question. So all local authorities have stretched budgets.
Yeah.
Do you have a priority out of those 130 recommendations?
Yeah, I know. It's very, very, very difficult. So this is a really live conversation that we are having right now with the new administration. So we have local authority elections have come in. We have a new leader. We have a new cabinet, and they are absolutely working with officers through to make those decisions because, as you say, there's no world in which we can fund everything. So it's about being really clear, where are the areas where ECC investment can really drive change, can really turn the dial, and how far can we encourage others to also put their hand in their pocket. The Commission recommendations, as I say, are not just for ECC, they're for everyone. So we need everyone to think about if they're buying something, if they're commissioning a service, if they're building a building, if they're thinking about a business model, is that moving us closer to a net zero world or further away? If it's moving us further away, you're going in the wrong direction. We need to turn that round. And I think just making it clear that actually this is an ask for everyone. So rather than thinking about climate spend as something separate that we do as an add-on standalone budget over here, that actually is baked into how we commission our services, is baked into how we buy and spend taxpayers' money, is really got to be the way to go. There will, of course, have to be prioritization. There always will be whenever you're talking about public spending. Come back to me in 6 months' time. We'll have finished that conversation and we'll know.
Good answer. I agree with you about the procurement thing. That's definitely some of the conversations I have, including in Essex, is around that procurement and saying you can do it. You can, if you're clear on your agenda. And I think that's what these 130 recommendations give us, is I think some clarity, so that when you're offering a solution and you can say, well, actually, I think I'm hitting this and this.
Yeah.
And then you as the commissioning body or the consumer can say, actually, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, right, we'll go with that solution rather than that solution. So I think, I don't know, credit to what we're seeing here. I
mean, it's not a this is a journey we're going on. This, this isn't a magic wand where, I go, well, I've got to commission a report, I'm job done. This is just the start of a process. And actually what we're doing is driving change. So the thing I always say to my team is we're not driving a change program inside ECC. We're driving ECC through a change program. It really got to think big and think long term, but drive action quickly now on the things where you can. And some of the things in local government are really long-term contracts, and those are baked into legal agreements. And the opportunity to refresh those is when those contracts come due to reprocure. So this is, as ever with all of these things, this isn't something that, again, I can, we're not going to have solved this problem in 6 months or indeed in 5 years, but we need to have made progress in 6 months and we need to have made real progress in 5 years. So it's about making sure we're on that road and we really are pushing the things where we can make progress.
Good. Well, I'm pretty confident, Sam, you're pushing hard. Philip Jordan raises a great question. And I think I know what I'd say, but what would you say to a council that's announced they could not afford to deal with the climate emergency?
So I do think they are thinking about the future for their residents and their businesses. We are moving to a net zero world. So you can either take your community with you on that journey, or you can ensure that your community is left behind. And I think, I've talked a lot about the adaptation risks, about flooding, about overheating. If we are not equipping our communities to deal with these increasing risks, then your communities are going to be suffering the consequences of that year in, year out with additional costs. I mean, the Stern Review, for those of you who are old enough to remember the Stern Review, it's really long time ago, was very clear that actually investing to tackle this problem is much more economically cost effective, much less costly than not bothering. So I would say that for local authorities that say that, for any organisation that is saying that, actually you haven't done your sums properly, you aren't taking a long enough view.
Very good. Long view like that. Just some updates really. So I've just been reminded that two of the commissioners on the ECAC are presenting for us over the next 2 weeks. So Victoria Hills, she's the Chief Exec of the Royal Town Planning Institute and a good speaker. And also Dr. Laura Mansell-Thomas, who's giving us a speech on housing zero carbon. And those are, Victoria is next Monday afternoon, and Laura is on this Wednesday at 9 o'clock. So it's always good. I think that was something you presented right near the start, actually, was pointing out that, a number of the commissioners hold some very powerful, very important positions.
Yeah, no, we have been incredibly lucky in being able to secure some time from really knowledgeable people. We have people like Victoria, who brings all of their professional expertise. We have academics from Essex universities. We have Jackie McGlade, who's a UNEP scientist, as well as community leaders from the church. We have leaders from the public sector as well as councillors. So NHS, very senior staff in NHS in Essex. Just a huge range of experts and people who are operating businesses in Essex, who have come together to really give us incredible amounts, very generously, of their time. But that you can see that you will see it in the final report, actually, when you start to see the depth of the recommendations. You can see those different perspectives that have been brought to bear on the problem. And commissioners have worked really hard to make sure that, although it's incredibly ambitious, and it really is, that it is deliverable. This is grounded in reality.
Well, that's really powerful. So I have one question which I wrote down. So I think I was reading something about this the other day. So you talked about subsidence being a real threat, and you talked about the real water scarcity in the east of the region, but generally across the southeast, we know there's a real pressure. But I guess, how do people? The report told me that most people are a bit reluctant to create new reservoirs. Is that something? I can't remember if that's something in the report around kind of storing our water.
I think there's anything which is a really significant change to the landscape, people are always wary of. So big change always comes with about, hang on a minute, that wasn't there 5 minutes ago. So I don't have a magic wand for that. We are part of Water Resources East, which is working with local authorities and organisations and water companies right across the East of England region to set a water strategy that tackles, nature recovery, climate change sensibly for the whole of East of England in a joined up way. And I think, we're really pleased and proud to be part of that consortium, part of that company that are driving that work. But I think, the whole sort of climate change challenge is about recognizing we're in a different world and we're going to have to drive some changes. So the world that we're in today, by the time we get to 2030, 2040, it's not going to look the same. So we can control that and shape it to be a better world that we want to live in, or we can end up being kind of pushed into a world that we don't want to live in. So I think, change is upon us, whether we would have it or not. And it's really about working with our communities to shape that in a way that delivers the maximum benefit for everyone.
That's brilliant. Okay, well, we're drawing to a close here, but Greg gives us the great question at the end. So if you could address the world leaders at COP26, what would be your one message?
The ambition is fantastic. The ambition is great, but national budgets need to follow. Ambition without money is just empty words. So, I'm looking at, so I'm really, really so pleased that, the government took on board the Climate Change Committee's recommendation. We've got a really bold 6th carbon budget, but I'm looking at the Chancellor going, you need to make that real. So that would be my message at COP26.
That's good. Show me the money.
Yeah, basically.
I think that's fair enough. I was going to come back. You said it, I think, near the beginning. What was talked about was citizen action. And I think you're coming right back to where you started your presentation, really, was the climate has already changed.
Yeah. And
we have to do something about it if we want to, as you said there, rather than being forced into a change, is we can control that change now if we spend our money in the right places. And as one of the other attendees has said, it's taking the long view and bake in those answers. So is there any closing words you'd like to give for us, Sam? I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Just thank you very much for inviting me along. I mean, I think, we are all working. I'm really heartened that, this has gone from, at the beginning of my career, something that was 3 people in a side room trying to get noticed, to a really mainstream conversation. So, it's very easy to get downhearted at the scale of the challenge, but actually we've seen immense change in the last few years, immense. And I'm really excited that we're all part of this conversation. I think it's great.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, let's finish on your excitement. Thank you very much, Sam, for talking to us today. And I hope the rest of you have enjoyed that presentation. It has been recorded. And I think just to finish out really is thank you for attending the webinar. I'd like to thank Sam again, our sponsors Atkins, Faithful and Gould, IES, NPS Group and Wilmot Dixon for the support. And for those of you who are here, it would be great if you could just give us some feedback at the end. We're going on for 2 weeks. If there's anything we ought to do slightly differently or that you want to see more of, then let us know. So we'll be sending out to all the delegates later links through to videos once they're available. So thank you so much, everyone, and see you at another one.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sam.